Everyone, welcome into a special collaboration, A Tale of Two Hygienists and
Dentistry Unmasked.
Yay!
we didn't practice that enough apparently, but Dentistry Unmasked, very happy to be here. Thank you everyone for joining us in the audience. Thank you for everyone that's going to be listening into this a little bit later on. Doctors, I'm excited for this one.
We're going to talk some real challenges in dentistry today. So dental hygienists, friend or foe?
So, okay, back when, every time I've been lecturing, I started lecturing back in 2010. As a former hygienist turned prosthodontist, I've always lectured about the value of your dental hygienist and how important the dental hygienist is for your practice, for your patients. And I feel like a little bit like we're getting, that's come back to bite us a little bit. I feel like with this staffing shortage and the wage asks and, these different things, I've always tried so hard to try to minimize that divide between dentists and hygienists, and I feel like it's kind of worse than ever.
It is. It's way worse than ever. I think partially the pandemic really screwed a lot of things over for all of us, right? Like it pitted the hygienist versus the doctor, the shortages that happened, a lot of hurt feelings were being had and happened. And I think some of it, though, rightfully so, right? I think some things were out of the control of the dental hygienist. Some of it was economical demands on the profession. And everyone's just frustrated about it, but we all have to kind of suck it up. But I think maybe hygienists didn't handle it very well, but also I don't think the doctors handled it very well. So how can we be a foe if no one's handling it very well?
Because Pam said so. I would agree with you. I think I don't think that the pandemic caused the problem. I think it just threw gas on the fire.
It accelerated it.
Yeah, because for decades, and again, I'm going to unplug Pam and I from this because I think we feel differently than many dentists do, but I bet there's a bunch of practices out there for many, many years who didn't do all the things they could have done to set the table for great relationships. And some did a really great job and others didn't do a very good job. And I think that's true of life in general. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, if we're going to be unplugging, I want to unplug too because I've had nothing but great doctors I've worked with. And so, but the thing is, as I think the representative of a hygienist here, we do see, whether it's like in our one-on-ones, right? Misty works for a large company. In our one-on-one conversations with our hygienists, we feel the pressure. When we're in our society meetings, when we're in social media forums, we still see like the pressure that we have.
Well, and the burnout that's in the industry too, and I think that COVID did accelerate that as far as that burnout. And I think that, we've had this whole doctor hygiene, we have to at some point come together and be able to partner, but I do agree that some of the demands of the hygienists have kind of got a little up there, but also some of the demands that they're asking for are things that they should have had, like the, respect, to not link, I talk to hygienists often and, their appointments are being shortened or things like that, because I did get it. We're all trying to also handle the patient load and then also the economics of the practice, right? And dental insurances have not helped us at all. And probably I think also is adding more fuel to the fire as well, right? Because reimbursements for, dentists have not gone up for procedures, and therefore salaries have. And not only salaries of hygienists, but also our auxiliary staff. So the whole overall business models are costing us more than ever before. But I think some of the things that they've asked for is, to be able to have time to, because we keep putting more and more on them too, right? Like we were saying, we were talking about this earlier about the hygienists that we're asking them in an hour's appointment to take blood pressure, take medical history, do a caries risk assessment, probe, we're giving them, take x-rays, all of that all in 1 hour. And so, but I think the wage issue is becoming a real problem because I think we're not partnering well with our doctors because we are hygienists in general. I've seen that, and it's causing doctors are looking for a way to fix the problem, right? Legislators are looking for a way to fix the problem. I sit on the Board of Dentistry in Georgia, and we're having the same issue that every state is. And it's bringing forth legislation that scares us all, and we're all a little nervous about what's going to come. But at the same time, we have to figure out a solution.
Can we, sorry to cut you off, can we start off like with one of the hot topics and then like kind of move like, I want to finish with wages, because I think wages is like the ultimate gasoline on this fire, right?
Sure.
I want to talk what you just said, shortening the appointments. And as, I don't want to, you're not the representatives of the doctors, but you kind of are the representative of the doctors.
Yeah.
Why are we shortening appointments? Like, what is the logic behind that when we're asking the hygienist to do more?
You want to start?
Well, I guess if you're asking the hygienist, well, okay, maybe this is short-sighted. You guys can call me out on this if you want to, but the practices that want the hygienist to provide caries risk assessment, blood pressure screenings, HbA1c, bacterial testing, are not the practices that are shortening appointments. The practices that I think that are shortening appointments are those that are experiencing a reduced reimbursement from their PPOs, or they're getting a financial pressure that's squeezing in that extra patient in the morning and that extra one in the afternoon might help to float the practice.
Right.
And so while, yeah, it sucks as a hygienist to do that, I understand, I was one, I know that, but there's a reason for it. And I think having an open dialogue there would be really important. I think that there's better ways that are better for patients to increase your revenue without shortening that appointment. But I think that that's a conversation that we need to have together. I mean, gosh, I think one of the easiest way to enhance your hygiene revenues, fluoride varnish.
Oh, hands down.
Varnish your patients. If you varnish your patients, I mean, to apply fluoride varnish on every patient, I mean, one application is like, on the most expensive varnish out there, one application costs the practice like $2, if that. And then, that national average for charging for fluoride varnish is somewhere between $35 and $50. So if you need to give your hygienist another couple dollars an hour, or you need to enhance your revenues, there's really easy ways to do it without making it more taxing for your hygienist. But I think that's a conversation that we should have.
Well, that's why I like compensation models that really focus in on patient care, right? So, because oftentimes I think like hygienists don't do fluoride because it's like this additional thing, and it should be something that they should be doing. So if you incentivize them to have that conversation, to do that caries risk assessment, to be able to place fluoride in those patients, I think that would help, as well. This is like, so, because I also do think, I'm also for the hygienists, but also I do think that sometimes some of the asks have gotten like crazy. I mean, I've even had people like ask if I could like lease them a car.
Wow. I've heard that story very well.
Interesting.
That's a story. I would agree with Pam that I think some of the pressures out there are in PPO-driven practices, Medicaid-driven practices, where the reality is today's dollars don't go nearly as far as they used to go. And then and you couple that with, so I'm 29 years in, and my debt load, very different than the debt load of somebody walking out of school today. So these are multifactorial problems, right? You take a 26-year-old who walks out of school at $500,000 in debt, and that's a $7,500 a month payment without food, rent, keep going. So that's not an excuse, but it is an issue I think we have to contend with. But in an out-of-network practice, I would agree. Like, there's no reason to be shortening appointments in an out-of-network practice today, unless you don't understand how to compete in the marketplace. And if that's the case, then it's up to me as a dentist to build a team that understands how to compete.
Right.
So let me ask this. So I like business. I might not be the best at business. My model would be, if I'm offering a pro fee and only getting reimbursed $17, but I have to pay $35 to $50 for a hygienist's time, why am I doing this loss leader service at all? Why do I have that in my practice?
Okay, I'll start. You shouldn't. It's an old model. It's broken. If you're losing $20, $30 an appointment, that's bad business. So options, a hygiene assisted model where all of a sudden you can double down on the production that happens, with a well-qualified, well-trained team member who can shoulder a lot of that load and maybe get you back to a better number. Or, I mean, we could turn back the clocks of history, right? When a GP practice sent lots of people to the periodontist and said, you know what, I'm not doing that, but what I will never do in my practice is compromise care, and what I also will never do in my practice is lose money 8 hours a day in hopes that I can diagnose and treatment plan my way out of it. That just doesn't make good sense.
Well, and I say utilize your hygienist to the full capacity.
True.
Right? Like if you utilize that, which also helps out with burnout, right? So if you allow them, instead of just doing cleanings, maybe they do whitening procedures as well, or you said they're doing fluoride on their patients, or allow them to do oral cancer screenings in your practice, right? Those are things that are going to provide more comprehensive care to that patient, and they're easy to add into that appointment as well. Like those are things you can add in very easily, and that increases the revenue, but also increases the care that you provide to those patients.
Could we establish, I think you guys are both very progressive doctors, which we love. What should be the minimum like services that are provided? And Misty does this all day, every day too. What are the minimum services a hygienist should be providing every appointment? I would say every recall appointment, because I know we have pair maintenance and all the other stuff, but.
I mean, there's a schedule of things. So obviously, like we tend to alternate perio charting, like full charting, like every other appointment, unless they're a perio patient. So there's things or whatever. But standard hygiene visit, you're just coming in for hygiene, medical history review, and including medications and what they're used for, and if they were taken today. See, Tom, I'm always listening, Tom Viola. So we're doing that, and obviously an oral cancer screening is on every single ReCare patient every single time by the hygienist and by me. A spot probing is a minimum, but obviously we're doing a full charting. I think it's every other appointment. And then obviously Carrie's risk assessment, perio risk assessment, and then we're guided biofilm therapy people, so we go through the 8 steps. So obviously air polishing, PA's on, and I come in for an exam when needed. I don't do an exam every 3 months, I do an exam every 6. But then obviously if there's an issue or something, I'll come in for that. X-rays when needed, and fluoride varnish when needed, or probiotics or antimicrobial varnish, or whatever it is that's adjuncts.
So you're doing all these things. So then
that's a standard. Yes, that's not an upsell at all.
But when we look at it, just like you said, fluoride, only 30% of are coding out for fluoride, right? Only 25% of dental practices actually do oral cancer screenings too. So I think if we took on really the more comprehensive piece and did all of those things, I think that maybe then there might not be such a wage discrepancy if we did all those things, Now I do think that sometimes they have gotten a little, some of them are getting out there on their ass. But I do think that before COVID, I graduated school 19 years ago, and COVID would have been like, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, however that is now. And wages had not increased from the time I graduated till, like everybody was still making the same amount of money from an hourly perspective for the most part, like coming out of hygiene school. Like what I was told to come out of hygiene school was about the same for a hygienist, now with experience, right, you should get, but still a lot of doctors were kind of like it was a standard. And so I think there was a little bit of room for growth, but I think it's kind of like, and the same thing with DAs. I mean, even DAs now are wanting these crazy.
See, I didn't experience that. So I remember I was so excited. I graduated hygiene school, about 25 years ago. And I remember I was making $25 an hour, and I was so excited about it. My first paycheck, I will never forget, I was walking in downtown Crossing in Boston, and this homeless guy comes up and he's like, "You got any money?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do."
What a great story.
I gave him I don't even know, but I was so excited because we were making $25 an hour. So, I mean, cut to 25 years later, I mean, that number's over doubled. So,
that is definitely doubled, especially in your area.
Yeah, I mean,
that's where you're at.
In my experience, I mean, hygienist wages have most definitely gone up, absolutely. Yeah. So, I don't know, I feel like, I mean, yes, and especially in my area, some of the asks are crazy, and some of the metrics that some hygienists are using to tell other hygienists what they should be making are crazy. I think that there should be business practices for hygienists and business education for hygienists, because then maybe your ask would be in line for what it is. And I think understanding the difference between what's billed versus what's collected, and how in many practices that's a totally different number, that like you can't make money that doesn't exist.
Correct. And that's one of the things I do educate the hygienist on, is that business model, and to say, you know, before you, like anytime they ask me, hey, should I talk to my doctor about a raise? I always say, look to see what you're actually producing for the practice and what you value, and then you should get a percentage of that, right? It should be around a percentage that you would be wanting to look at, because there's real fixed costs that the dentist is going to have, the cost of supplies and all those type things. So you got to look at it from that model and be realistic, because sometimes I've had hygienists that literally say, oh, they want this astronomical amount of money or an astronomical raise.
That never happens.
Right?
Come on.
You know, but sometimes it's like, well, does it really do that? And so then I go back to, are you offering these like comprehensive cares? Are you doing fluoride for your patients? Because those are things like, and then when you're doing those type things, then I think then that's the time to have those conversations with your doctor, because ultimately he or she's going to benefit from, you know, that, and have that conversation to make sure they're on board with you doing those things too, right?
No, I agree with that too. I personally, as a hygienist, would like a safety net. So I like the safety net model where, look, I'm maybe not making as much as the people that are straight hourly, but I'll never go below it. But I have the potential, based on my investment in my patients, to make much more. My question, I guess, to you would be, and I understand that this is going to be a variable number, but what is a realistic expectation for a production number that a hygienist should be attaining? Because I think a lot of them, if we're looking at 8 patients a day, which is probably not that, but you know, a lot of hygienists are like, okay, we have our prophy, we have our fluoride, and we have our x-rays, and we're done. Mm-hmm. And that's going to, you know, generate, you know, $1,200.
I think in today's model, at 8 patients, probably $1,200 around where they should probably be daily as far as production for the practice. Especially given it to make it profitable for the practice and for the dentist, the business owner, right? Mm-hmm. That they would have to be somewhere around that.
Would you include x-rays into their production model? What would be like the things that get put into a production model?
Well, I'm not one that includes x-rays, because usually our dental assistants take most of our x-rays, our auxiliary staff. So it's really more of just hygiene services. Plus, x-rays are diagnostic, so they're really utilized to be able to help, you know, the doctor and the hygienist be able to get treatment too. But our DEAs traditionally take those, so I don't compensate on x-rays. But I will say, you know, when I was in private practice, I was compensated on the x-rays. Yeah. I got a percentage of, you know, my total treatment for my patients. And I really valued that, because it also I learned the business model too, right? I got to see, and it was also, I got to have that conversation with my doctor kind of monthly on how my department did. And I think that really was huge on my career and my success, because he taught me very early that value that I brought. And I never asked for a raise unless I really saw that it was there for me to even have, if that kind of makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I definitely think our hygienists are friends, because I think that there's lots of things that they bring value to the patients. I mean, a lot of our patients just come in to see hygiene, right? Mm-hmm. They're a real driving force for patients, you know. I've seen doctors that have moved to this model where they're moving away from having a hygienist in their practice, and I don't think that's the right model, but some of them are moving to that model, and, you know, and looking for other ways to be able to do that. I just think that hygienists are definitely a friend. I think we have to do more, and I've said this for years and years, for dentists and hygienists to really build that bridge of communication. Because ultimately, everybody has the best, intentions, right? Like, I don't think anybody has bad intentions. Just like, I imagine they're asking for higher wages because things for them are more expensive. I mean, I think all of us today, I was talking with a friend recently about how for like groceries and everything. So I think that, you know, some of that, but we've got to really bridge that gap and start having conversations and help our hygienists. As dentists, I think you have a lot of value to show them those numbers and help them educate and show them the P&L and your team, because You know, and I think like even, you know, I worked for a dentist and they did like a profit sharing with us, and that was a phenomenal thing to be a part of because we all got to have all got to see, and it got to the point that like when you start revenue, I mean literally they were like buying the cheapest toilet paper, you know, like different things like that, because everybody was invested that we all got a piece of that profit if we worked together to do that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Can I play devil's advocate for 1 second here?
Always.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, one of my favorite contributors, I love you all contributors for dental economics, but one that's just like really special is Dr. Roger Levin. And he puts out a practice survey, a fee survey, a salary survey every year. And according to Roger, and I believe Tanya, Dental Post, everybody is making more money.
Oh.
Staff, hygienists, office managers, everybody. But guess who's making less money every year? The dentist. And why is that okay?
It's not.
Well, let's talk about
I'm
why
not saying
are they
it's
making
not.
less.
Because they're taking their fees are high. Everything, their expenses are higher, their bottom line is higher, everything they're paying out to their team is higher, and the way that they're compensating for it's not like they're like, well, I've got higher expenses, so therefore I'm having a better year.
Right.
We're having like the same year, but all of a sudden our expenses are up. That money has to come from somewhere. Dentists are actually taking home less money now than they did years prior.
So let me ask this, and I'm not trying to be like antagonistic, but I kind of am a little bit. So then why aren't you charging more then? Like if this whole economy is everything else is more expensive, then why aren't dental fees getting higher? Why aren't we fighting for better reimbursements? Why aren't we fighting for you guys to still have the same, we have the same, like everyone has the same, we're just up a bracket, all of us together?
So, I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why we all belong at an event like this, right? Because that comes, we all have to do our share, and we all have to be willing to fight the fight, but that is a bigger fight.
Yeah.
And there are things that are looming that probably shouldn't stay from this stage, but when dentistry becomes medicine, which is going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. Then that top end number, we have zero control over that number unless we are totally out of network and operate almost in a DDS VIP, like the MD VIP model. But when that happens, and it is happening, within probably the next 5 years, realistically, maybe 10 at the most, you're faced with a ceiling, and that's the new norm.
But is there something we can do to improve? Because we know, like the whole thing with dentistry is we've been so fearful of the medical model, right? Because of those reimbursements. We're like,
sure, and
we're trying to push that off. So, is there a way that we could, like, have those conversations with the dental insurances and create something that maybe is a hybrid or something? Like, does it have to be exactly that?
In my humble opinion, realistically, no.
Okay,
Listen,
then let's be change makers.
Money and power talks. At the end of the day, money and power talks. That's just a life truism. Now we're going to fight. Now, for me personally, what am I going to do? I'm going to stay out of network, charge whatever I want to charge, and realize that in any community, a 4-dentist practice that has 6,000 patients has more than enough work to do, and we'll build our brand. But if you said that is 10% of practices in the United States of America and 90% are else, if you're in that 90% and you're listening or watching this right now, you better pick a side. You better get really great at volume, or you better get really great at boutique, because if you live in the middle, you're dead in the water. And I'm sorry to say that, but that is the truth.
Yeah. No, I love that a lot. I think we've handled a couple of things. I kind of want to get into office culture a little bit.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about boutique,
sure,
you talk about retaining staff, you talk about someone who's going to take maybe a couple dollars less, but has maybe not profit share, but like a really solid work environment. I would go work for both of you in a heartbeat if I was still practicing.
I was going to say, you have an open invite anytime, Andrew.
Once I move to Salem, I'll go work for you. But the thing is, I know that one, patient care is the most important, which aligns with my personal philosophies.
Absolutely.
2, you're going to give me the tools I want. How many offices out there do EMS? Like, honestly,
I know,
not very
that's
many.
So cool.
I would be happy to learn a new system where our patients are going to love seeing me. That's awesome. I would take less money to live in that kind of an environment. I think a lot of hygienists would, as long as they're still able to pay their bills.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you would get to use like cool equipment like that, right? Like a hygienist would be, I myself would be more willing to take a job where I had great supplies, good instruments, you know, got to use technology, versus, you know, a practice that doesn't have that, right? I'd be more apt to.
I think so. I think one thing that's really important for practice owners and for hygienists and for even assistants is to identify what your vision is and what your mission is and what your why is. And if your why doesn't align with the practice's why, then you're never going to fit. It's never going to work. You won't, you know, there's no amount of money that's going to make you be comfortable in a practice that doesn't align with your value system.
Absolutely.
And so I think that we all have to take that time to dig deep and try to discover and share what that is. It's vulnerable, it's hard, it's not easy, but I mean, you're the culture guy. Tell us about, like, I mean, how do you do that and make sure that everybody on board is on board? I mean, for me, after you read my vision and my mission, if you weren't like nodding your head while you were reading it, you probably don't belong here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important for all of us to understand what drives every human behaviorally. Is it money? Do they want to look good in the community? Is it time? Is it trust? Do they want to just be comfortable? Do they want to be healthy and balanced? What drives everybody? And then when you have that vision and share that vision with people, and you pull that vision into their core values and what drives them, then you can start figuring out if a fit is there. And when a fit's there, amazing. And when a fit isn't there, I don't think it's bad at all. And if you look at our history, like we've turned over 2 team members in 29 years.
Wow, that's impressive.
So that's the frame of the story. But with that frame of the story, we're very much like, our ship's going here. We really want you to come with us. But if you want to go in the other direction, it's okay for us to be friends. It's just not okay for us to work together.
Right.
Like, we don't have to be mad. We could just move on.
Yeah.
But when, I don't know, and I think as an employee or an employer, like that level of conviction works. And anything less is like, well, let me just go see what I want to do next, because they kind of care, but they don't care that much.
Yeah. I think before we end, just for anyone that's in the audience, I want to give you an opportunity to ask the doctors questions, well, us too, I guess, but really the doctors questions too. So, but before we get there, let me ask one more question while you guys are thinking about it. You know, the whole friend or foe thing, I think overwhelmingly hygienists want to be best friends with their doctors. I can't tell you how much I love my doctors.
Absolutely.
There's obviously some things that we're doing incorrectly. We've established some of those. But thinking along like what you've seen in social media, what you've seen in your conversations with other doctors, what more can hygienists do to be a friend? And by friend, I mean like just a really good employee. Like, we don't have to really be friends, but not adversaries.
I mean, I am friends with my hygienist. I'm obsessed with my hygienist. I love them, and I want them to stay with me forever. Honestly, I think it's a mutual respect. You know, I feel when I went to hygiene school, we were sort of taught it's us versus them, and like that was like bred into us. And then all of a sudden I became them, and I'm like, but I mean, what do you mean? Like, it doesn't have to be that way, and it does not have to be that way.
It does not have to be that way.
But I think it's a mutual respect, and I think that as a restorative dentist, I couldn't do it without a strong hygiene team. Like, like they're weaseled into everything I do. I mean, I have my hygienist, you know, before I start a treatment plan, I won't start a treatment plan if they're not periodontally healthy. And then throughout their treatment plan, before they're prepped, before, you know, while they're in temps, before final impressions, they're back in with the hygienist, even if it's not their 6-month recall. Like, no one's on a 6-month recall in my office. But it's like, you're coming in for an airflow procedure. I mean, so it's me and my hygienist partnering together to get that patient to the end point, and now they're in the hygienist's hands to maintain. And there's a mutual level of, you know, I need you to get my patients healthy, but you're looking at my restorations later. And, you know, we both have to raise our game for each other. And I think that we can and should.
Yeah, and I want to hear what you guys have to say too. For me, it's really simple. It boils down to we before me. I owe you that. we all owe each other that. And when we come in with a collaborative we before, that we win together, before I win personally, then good things happen. But when you walk in the door with yourself first, and I walk in that same way, like it's never going to click.
I'm going to say it's that mutual respect, but also I think it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. We had a podcast. Like, we have to have ADA and ADHA have to come together, and I would love to see like this, like here at this event, this is really doctor focused, and the same thing at ADHA, it's all hygiene focused. Why couldn't there be dual together type of meeting that you would have ADA, ADHA, SmileCon with ADA and ADHA, and start bringing and bridging that gap, because we live in this silo worlds. And I think in order for us to really grow as clinicians, as oral health care providers, and to build that respect, it really does start with those organizations, because they're the ones that, you know, we're members of. And if we could really get those for us to really come together, and I really saw like lots of collaboration during COVID, and I really wanted that to continue, and then now we're all back to, okay, now I'm doing my thing and that thing. And so I really hope that this podcast, these conversations that we're having, people begin to think through that, because we've got to eliminate that divide, because we can't function without you, and you can't function without us.
Sure.
Right? And our patients need us all. And instead of us doing these silo things, I think it's time that we all come together, and I think that will really change, and it's going to start with all of us making those changes.
I think for me, I mean, obviously everything people have said already, but it's for me, it's a scope of practice thing. And just, I think it's because I come from where I come from with what I was doing restorative and all that. I don't want to be limited. When I had, and I've told this on a Tale of Two Hygienists podcast before, but when I moved to Florida and I got my local anesthesia, you guys know I've been doing local anesthesia for, you know, more than a decade before then, hundreds of thousands of injections for all sorts of restorative and surgery procedures. And then to have a new grad doctor say, you're not allowed to do that, that really frustrated me. I'm like, I'm licensed to do this, and no offense, but I have way more experience than you do. I love your patient just as much as you love your patient. I want to be able to provide a service for that patient during our hygiene part. It wasn't even during, like, I wasn't trying to anesthetize for restorative. That, I think, is what I would want as a hygienist, to just give me as much ability to still work under the supervision, but give me more that I'm allowed to do. Give me the EMS, which you don't have to have. I don't think there's like legislation on EMS, but there's legislation on, you know, when can we do scaling room planning, who's in the office, local anesthesia, temporary restoratives, and things like that. Whatever it is in my state, help me get there so I can better serve our collective patient, right? I mean, that's ultimately, I think, what we want.
I love it.
Yeah.
And that's showing me respect. Like,
yeah,
that's
that is
trust.
respect.
Totally.
That's trust.
Like,
that's what
that.
we do want. Nobody wants to have their, individual practice. I just want to be able to practice to like everybody else around the country.
Yeah.
And that has, and you know, that was a big thing too. I've noticed, we have a shortage of hygienists in our state, and we just passed local anesthesia, and it's intriguing that there's more and more hygienists now, like wanting to be licensed by credentials and are wanting to come in because they were working in other states that they could do that, and they would never even come into Georgia because of that. Just like you were offended by it, going to Florida. And so we want to be able to practice to our full. We want to be able to partner with our doctors. We want to be able to, bridge that gap, because I do think that whole like dentist, what you talked about, like you were taught in hygiene school, that was definitely there when we went to hygiene school. Yeah. I hope now that it's not continuing to be taught, because it's not how it should be. And unfortunately, that generation, that it negatively impacted our profession, and it's time. And I'm really excited for the youth, because I don't think they see it that way. And I see, now working on a board with younger doctors that see it differently. They're actually practicing in dental school with the hygienist more one-on-one. Yeah. So I hope we'll see that change. But like I said, it really does start with us, because now we're the leaders in this field, in this industry. And so it really does begin with us.
Sure.
Not to put anyone on the spot, there doesn't have to be any questions, so I want to put that as a caveat. Are there any questions from anybody in the audience before we wrap this up?
Yeah.
You can just shout it out. You can come up closer and just shout it. Oh, there's a microphone right here. Sorry.
Oh.
I don't know if it's on or not. I don't think our sound people are around, but.
Close enough. So, thank you for all the information. How much do you think, give you some demographics? By the way, I'm Chris Galecki of Washington State. So in our state, we got it?
Sorry, we might be able to get this now.
Hello.
All right.
Yes.
Now everybody can hear. Karaoke. Oh no, you don't want karaoke. As I would introduce myself in my state, I am the Chris Galecki. So anyways, thank you for your time and the information and your...
From what state?
Washington State.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
he's
you.
your state.
Is that your state?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Originally.
Originally.
Sorry. So you already win, whatever it is. Okay.
So demographics in Washington State, the FQHCs, which has dramatically expanded since Obamacare, cannot employ hygienists because of salaries. Their salary level is about 50% of what currently a hygienist can make in the state of Washington. So you have a population which is in most need of hygiene services.
Right.
Second demographic, in our state, we have over 1 million individuals either on Medicaid or seniors that don't have access to care because of financial issues. Before COVID, we had a workforce shortage, particularly in hygiene, and now both hygiene and dental hygiene. Should we be dramatically increasing the number or the class sizes of hygiene programs in our country?
By the way, I did not see that twist coming. That's a great question.
Yeah. I'll I'll answer that. I think we do need to. Now, the U.S. News and World Report in 2016 put out a news article that actually talked about that hygienists were going to be that we're going to have a shortage come 2022. That we would have had a 8% shortage. Then we also lost hygienists because of COVID, so that intensified that. So I definitely think we need to incentivize more people to go to hygiene school. COVID also, and all the reports about dentistry and hygiene being like the most scariest position, and really did impact because a lot of people are not entering into hygiene school. We're not having the same numbers go into hygiene school as we did. So I think that there would ways to promote that, to be able to incentivize them to go in and incentivize them to go work in safety net settings too. I think we need to do that both for doctors and hygienists in safety net settings, to incentivize them, with loan forgiveness, things like that. That would be really helpful. I do definitely think that we need to somehow see an increase in hygienists entering school, and that somehow in some way we need to incentivize them, and also incentivize them to go work in safety net settings, like in Washington where it's hard for you. Is there a way that, like a retirement, to have a retirement plan, which they're not going to get in like a private practice setting, right? Where they would have like a pension plan, right? Like pensions in my generation, we don't have them anymore, right? Like we're not going to have it, but I'm saying like to have something like that might encourage them to do that. Like my mom worked for the state, and when I grew up, and one of the reasons why is because she had this phenomenal benefits and pension plan. She never made a lot of money, but now she's retired and she's gets to live a pretty comfortable life. So some way to incentivize them. But absolutely, I do think we should. To answer your question.
And in fact, in our state, every hygiene program has a waiting list. So there's not there's also not an issue of individuals wanting to go.
It's also educators.
I
There's
agree.
a shortage of educators.
Well,
I think we're doing okay in
is-
Washington. So I would like to answer the question just because I have like an alternative view on that. Because what you were all talking about is, yes, it would be great to have more hygienists out in the force.
there.
That's not going to reduce the demand of wage. You're still going to have, the way market forces work, we're not going to go back, I think probably the Seattle area is like this 60 to 80 marks per hour, right? Even higher than that, right? And it depends on if you're doing restorative services and whatever. if you're on, Yakima, Spokane, like on the east side, it's a little bit different, but they're still going to be making $50 to probably $70 an hour now compared to what they were before. So you're not going to see a return from the $50 an hour to the $35 an hour, no matter how many hygienists you put in the pipeline. That's not going to work. And so what I would love, like this is like a magic fantasy world that'll never happen, but I would like to see a model of dentistry that I think they have maybe in the UK or somewhere, where it's essentially train tracks. And you can jump off those train tracks at whatever level you feel comfortable with. So if you're saying, look, I want to be an assistant, I'm going to get on this one track that we all start on, but I'm going to jump off at dental assisting, or we have FDAs in Washington, I'm going to jump off at FDA, I'm going to jump off at whatever between FDA and hygienist, but not doing the restorative functions would be like doing the perio procedures and things like that. That could be employed by the FQHCs. And then we have what our hygienists are, which is like a hybrid model, et cetera, et cetera. I would love to see like something like that, because those next people below, as far as the scope of practice, could not demand the wage of what a hygienist does. But it also gives someone who doesn't want to go through the essentially 4 years of very rigorous education that we have to go through in Washington and most states, that they don't have to do all of that. They could do it maybe in 2.5 or 3 years. But I mean, again, this is kumbaya, like this is never going to happen, but I think that would satisfy what we're looking for.
I appreciate your comments on that, because one of the things we have found that we have little diversity in the hygiene workforce in our state, and we have an extremely increasingly diverse population.
Yeah.
So when you talk about taking a medical history, well, you may not speak Somali, but maybe the assistant can speak Somali. Mm-hmm. So how do we, I agree with you, how do we build that train track? So, or potentially even allow individuals coming from diverse backgrounds where English is a second language, how can they get into a hygiene program? So
I love that you think
that's
about
a great
that.
concept.
I love
Thank
that.
you about that. Thanks again for being here. Great, great to have you and bring up the topic.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, I think another thing that we're starting to see is I know there's legislation in Massachusetts that's been put out about allowing foreign trained dentists to come in and get a hygiene license really without any board exam or without anything. And I mean, we're going to see, that change at some point, if legislation like that takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our time is past. If anyone wants to, talk to us, of course, we're here podcasting all day long.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here. It's been great to be a guest of A Tale of Two Hygienists.
Well, thanks for having us a guest as Dentistry Unmasked.
Yeah.
I know, right?
So we just wanted to thank you guys and give you guys some air tags.
Oh,
that's so
wow.
nice.
Thank you,
I
Doctor.
definitely need these for my keys.
Excellent. Been great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening to the show this week, and thanks to our guests and sponsors on this episode.
Please check out our social media at Dr. Pamela_Maragliano and at Dental Economics Official.
Or you can check me out at Ignite DDS or at Dr. David Rice.
And go to dentaleconomics.com to receive dental economics. You can choose to receive DE in print or digitally, and you can also get the details of our Principles of Practice Management Conference on our website.
If you have topics or guests or anything you'd like to talk about on the show, send us an email to dentistryunmaskedpodcast@gmail.com, and we will do our very best to make it happen. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.